Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. The Libyan Parliamentary Committee's failure on Monday to fix a new date for the country's elections has brought into doubt the likelihood of the poll taking place at all. Instead, the committee called for the reshuffling of the country's Tripoli-based interim government until a more realistic roadmap towards elections has been agreed on. Originally scheduled for last Friday, the now postponed vote was widely regarded as a fresh start for the country, which has been marred by conflict since the toppling of the former dictator Muammar Gaddafi 10 years ago. The delay was in part due to internal disputes over the legal basis of the election and the candidacy of several controversial figures, including Gaddafi's son and warlord Khalifa Haftar. So what will it take to bring Libya to the ballot box? And can it be done in harmony, if at all? And to discuss where Libya could be headed, joining me now from Rabat is Noman Charkawi. He is a geopolitical analyst at Policy Center for the New South, a Morocco-based policy think tank. And from Rome, Umberto Profazio. He is an associate fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. This was going to be the country's first presidential elections, but unfortunately it didn't happen. Umberto, what was the underlying reason for that?
Well, I think that since the beginning, everybody knew about the fact that elections could not happen in Libya on the 24th of December this year, basically because there were not the right preconditions. In my opinion, they should have started with establishing a constitutional basis for elections, or better, a constitutional framework, and then move on to renew the legitimacy of discredited institutions, because Libya rightly needs an election. We need a reset of the political institutions in the country, but these were not the right thing to do it. Especially establishing a date so close after the third round of fighting in Libya could have all increased tensions, and we saw it in the past few months with the candidacy of very divisive political figures.
Yeah, so Noman, what's your take on that? Didn't policymakers and the international community see that was coming, and why necessary measures haven't been taken beforehand? I mean, who's the spoiler here?
Well, I think it's a complicated picture, because while we did know that things were going to, it was heading to implosion, a lot of international states, they wanted to see elections anyway. So there was this hyper focus on elections, despite that not being the solution at this moment. So you saw Aguila Saleh, for example, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, he exploited that sort of momentum and passed a law with a subset of Parliament unilaterally, and they violated multilateral frameworks. They didn't get the necessary legitimacy and necessary consensus, which from that moment, it was clear that things are not going to develop in a constructive way. And then we saw 100 different candidates try to run for elections. We saw, there was complaints about judicial appeals. Different candidates were trying to run, like Saif al-Gaddafi, Khalifa Haftar, people who are extremely divisive, and people who within a proper electoral framework might not be able to run. So then we saw issues like that. There was a lack of consensus. It was going to be rejected by all sides. There were questions about electoral integrity. Yeah. And I think these issues, they came to the forefront.
So it seems, Umberto, the slate of presidential aspirants includes Gaddafi and then warlord Khalifa Haftar, as well as the transitional leader Abdul Hamid Debaiba. Why do you think Libyan politics are stuck among these three prominent names?
These were the front runners, and it struck the imagination, the fact that everybody was calling for having elections, and rightly so, because we need to have a political turnover. But at the same time, these three figures, they suggest that it was almost a return to the past, because we have General Khalifa Haftar, who was responsible for most of the most incredible things in the past few years in Libya. and we have the return of the son of Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, the return of Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, for example, and the same Prime Minister of the Government of National Unity, Abdelhamid Dbeibeh. So instead of refreshing the political elite of Libya, we had almost a return to the past. And this, I think, was the thing that collapsed the entire political framework, because we saw that there were judicial issues and the return of the militias in the country. We had a transitional phase in the past few months in which it was possible to negotiate a compromise, but the window of opportunity was missed because of the fact that tensions increased. And when tensions increase in Libya, militias turn back on the center stage.
So, Noman, if this uncertainty prevails, what kind of risks Libya will likely to face? I mean, could it plunge into another civil war?
I think, the chances of conflict relapse are high. Elections have been postponed, but there's no agreement on what dates. The HNC is, the Electoral Commission is proposing January 24. Parliament yesterday, they didn't endorse that date. They just said that we want to restructure the government of national unity. So really, a lot of people are just looking out for their self-interests, and they're not looking for the elite turnover, which we want, which Libya needs to see. So yeah, the more immediate risk is that a political crisis could fuel like local disputes between armed groups in Tripoli. We saw maneuvering there. In the West, we might see international states, increasingly try to consolidate their gains, especially because there's no agreement on what the next steps will look like.
We know that the UK, France, Germany, Italy, and the US have all called on Libya to set an elections date as soon as possible. Could it be possible, Umberto, under these circumstances? And how do you think are the international players positioning themselves now?
I think that in the next few weeks, it will be important to watch two main trends. Internally, we can see like a duality between the House of Representatives on one side, which is trying to regain its political prerogatives after the past few months, and on the other side, the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum, which was the body that established the UN roadmap and set the 24th of December as the election date. Yes. So if the House of Representatives cannot agree on a roadmap or better, a constitutional framework or a new date for the elections, I think there will be increasingly trends towards restoring the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum as a surrogate to try to find a solution to the Libyan crisis. Externally, I think that this was a year in which we saw a lot of rapprochement, normalization agreements between different states. And that's why I think that this was a good window of opportunity for Libya to set its conditions to go to the elections and renew the political legitimacy of these institutions. I'm not sure if this rapprochement will continue in the next year, and if tensions could increase between rival countries, and this could bring into question Libya again in the next future.
So, Noman, what's your take on the UN's performance lately? We know that the UN's envoy to Libya, Kubis, has just abruptly tendered his resignation without disclosing any details. We really don't know what was happening there, but some say he was backing the House of Representatives. But on the other hand, could these latest normalization efforts in the region by the UAE, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Qatar help solve Libya's political stalemate, or they have just their own interests?
Okay, so to address the UN question, I think they've had an extremely difficult mandate in Libya. It's a complex conflict. There's unprecedented foreign interference, which means also the United Nations Security Council is divided. Yes. So different states veto different things when their interests are threatened. We saw in the past special envoys, they sometimes have non-neutral agendas. Jan Kubis, he came in, he was too passive. He didn't want to move to Tripoli. He legitimized spoilers by backing Aguila Saleh's plan unilaterally, even though it violated his own multilateral framework, the LPDF roadmap, the UN organized one. And he was just unaware of key dynamics, and he resigned in a crucial period. So that was really detrimental. His successor should be better because she's seen as more professional, more competent, and she's been meeting stakeholders to sort of get the political process back on track. I think it's still early to say. It's an increasingly delicate balancing act between all the countries. You have Turkey, Qatar, UAE. Turkey needs to, it's a stronger Qatar ally, but the UAE has also, it's pragmatic interests with elections, but they still have a fundamental disagreement in Libya.
So, Umberto, are we likely to see a united or a divided Libya moving forward?
I think a united Libya is in the interest of everyone, and especially the Libyans. This is a question that should be directly addressed to the Libyan population, to the Libyan people. And according to the polls, a majority of Libyans would like to see a Libyan united. But given the fact that the fundamental issues have not been addressed, and here I refer to the monopoly of the use of violence, the reunification of the military, the redistribution of oil revenues. These are fundamental questions for Libya's futures, and only a constitution can address these questions, and trying to find a comprehensive agreement, an inclusive agreement between all the different stakeholders, yes, which in Libya are multiple.
All right, Umberto, Noman, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.